Loneliness is at an all-time high. We're more connected digitally than ever, yet so many of us feel isolated and unseen, especially as the holidays approach. But what if the answer to feeling less alone is extending an invitation? What if one small, imperfect hospitality moment could be a ripple of hope into someone else's life and even into yours? Welcome to the Habits of Hope podcast, where we believe a life rooted in hope grows through daily rhythms that help us trust God's faithfulness, even in life's hardest seasons. I'm Ginger Harrington, author, blogger, and podcaster, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're diving into one of my favorite topics, the power of hospitality to heal loneliness and create connection. And I can't think of a better guest to guide us than Sue Donaldson. Sue is a retreat speaker, author, podcast host, and hospitality mentor who shares God's heart for welcoming others into our homes and our lives. Her book, Never Alone, Stories of Invitation and Connection in the Isolated World, is packed with hope-filled stories and practical wisdom for living a life of invitation. Sue, your ministry is all about helping women reflect God's welcoming heart. Welcome to the Habits of Hope podcast.
I feel thoroughly welcomed. Thank you, Ginger. It's a delight to be here.
Well, we're glad that you've joined us today. Can you share a little bit about where your passion for hospitality began and why this message of invitation matters so deeply to you?
Sure. I was single till I was 35, back in the day when that was more unusual. I was lonely at times. I remember standing in a church parking lot after church, and I was in a young career mode, and I knew the people in my church loved me, and off they would go, packing their kids up in their vans to take them home and give them lunch and naps. And I thought, why didn't they invite me over for lunch? Because I needed a family to be in. And this was when I was in my early 20s. And now I'm 73. So I have found through all these years that if someone would have just invited me over that day, I would have felt so much less lonely. And I thought then, I think they like me. They just probably think I have this exciting single life, which I did not. And so I ended up calling 6 different women that I had become acquainted with that I wanted to get to know better, all of them married, all with young children, to come over for a Saturday brunch. Now, I didn't make very much money, and I wasn't, Julia Child or Martha Stewart or anybody like that, but I could read, so I could read a recipe. So I invited these women over for brunch, and I think they were surprised and probably busy. Saturdays, they want to get things done, but they came. And I did it a few times, and it made all the difference because they felt loved on, and they probably gave them a treat away from their home. And so from then on out, in this particular series of my life, I was there at that church for 4 years. These women became my mentors, and I could call them at any time with a boyfriend problem or whatever problem, and they would take me to lunch, which was really great. But I just found really that's just one small part of hospitality, but I ended up realizing that sometimes when you're lonely, you just have to make the first step.
One of the things that comes to mind, and I've talked about this before, is every relationship begins with an invitation of some kind. When I think about relationships in my life, I am so grateful that one of us or the other made that first invitation to relationship, to connect. And, so oftentimes it just starts with, hi, I'm so-and-so. Or, hi, I'm Ginger, I'm not so-and-so.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. And you also say, would you like to come for coffee? Like one time we went to church at a different service, so I saw different people, you know how that is. And there were these college-age kids sitting a couple rows down, so I normally wouldn't see them because we were at a different service. So I invited them all for dinner a week from Tuesday. And then we went out to brunch, and there was a server who was college age, and I was asking about what year she was, and she was a senior, but she was only 18. And I said, were you homeschooled? I just asked questions like that. And she said, yes, I'm a missionary child. So I asked her what mission, and she told me, and I said, where do you go to church? Well, she doesn't go to church. So I said, well, I didn't say anything about that, but I said, hey, you want to come for dinner a week from Tuesday? So all 4 of these kids came, and it turned out that this waitress, this server girl, was in class with this guy that day who goes to our church. And they all came, and they all told their stories around my table, and then I became particularly close to one of the girls, and we're friends to this day. Now she's married with 2 kids. It's just wonderful. But I love what you just said, that every relationship begins with an invitation. And that's why I do this, because God's invitation to us was, come to my table and you'll find rest. And so our job is just to pass that along.
I love that. I love that. And I really feel like this is a challenge in today's world. I think we have lost
Mm,
the art of invitation,
mm,
and we depend on other people to do the inviting and the initiating, thinking somebody else will do it. And we're busier, I think, than we've ever been
yeah,
with all this online stuff. Our phones, our Netflix, all the things have some nice attributes in life, but they busy us up like nobody's business. There is a lot of loneliness and a lot of surface relationships because it takes time
yeah,
together and not just texting time to build relationship. And I love the fact that God put it in your heart all those years ago to just step forward in faith and invite people, and then it's so fun to watch what God does
right.
around
Oh,
a dinner table or a table with food and beverage, and people start talking, and it's almost always a great time.
right. Just yesterday, I had 2 women over who I thought they had met. I found out they hadn't. It didn't matter, with women, it doesn't matter. And I had leftovers, knowing that this one gal loves pulled pork because she's married to a Persian, so he doesn't eat pork. So I just said, hey, you guys want to come for leftovers? And we talked almost 3 hours. And then they wanted to help with the dishes. We had such a sweet time, and we exchanged recipes. We exchanged stories. They don't go to church. They know I do. I'm just praying that it's a launching off point for an opportunity to continue to love them.
I love that. In some of your work, you have said that loneliness is an unnecessary disease
Mm.
and that simple hospitality can be the cure. What does God's heart teach us about welcoming others, and how does that reshape the way that we can think about opening our homes and our lives?
God's word says, be hospitable without grumbling. And that's not a suggestion, Ginger. It's a command. And it's not only a beautiful part of an attribute of an elder of the church, it's said to all believers. So to me, I just, some women flail about wondering what their purpose is, especially when their kids are gone. They know what their purpose is when they have kids at home. But when their kids are gone, they have this empty house and they go, oh dear, what am I supposed to do now? Should I join a gym? Well, yeah, that's a good idea. But as far as your purpose, you don't have to go to seminary. You don't have to go get a spiritual formation degree. You don't have to teach a Bible study. Just go across the street and invite your neighbor over for banana bread that you didn't even bake. I mean, we have Trader Joe's. You might have Aldi's. You might have Costco. You don't have to like to cook to obey God. You just don't have to. You just buy it, or you do a potluck. When I speak on this, I came up with 17 reasons why we don't do hospitality, and we won't get into all of them, but there's one reason to do it anyway, and that's to show off God's welcoming heart to a person who just needs to be invited.
Yes. I love the fact that you are not afraid to serve leftovers.
He loved them. So, to me, that was a huge success.
Absolutely. I think so many of us hesitate to invite people in because we feel like we have to have the perfect house, the perfect menu, or even the perfect words. And what are some practical ways we can push past those fears and open the door anyway?
Well, I know you speak about perfection and how it makes us stumble. I think we stumble over ourselves. So I just have to pray, God, help me not get in the way of how you want to use my home. Because our home is our palace and we get to share it with the world. Doesn't matter how humble it is. And we went through a 13-year remodel, and I'm here to say that I lived through it. We lived in the back of the house while my husband was pushing out the front of the house. And he's from Iowa, and that's just who he is, and I can't do anything about it. But I still had company, like in the bedroom on the bed with the heater, because it was cold. And as long as I could keep having company, I could survive. But believe me, it was a great excuse not to have a clean house because there was lumber everywhere and no walls. You ask me, oh, how can we get over it? Well, I think one tip is to get over ourselves. So that's a spiritual thing. We just take it to God. We surrender ourselves to God, and we ask Him for the courage. And then we ask Him for guidance. And I call it a little hospitality antenna, that we go out of our house every day. We go to work, we go to the gym, we go to church, and we ask God to straighten this or tweak the antenna to point towards the person who needs your invitation. And it may be somebody totally unlikely, maybe a stranger. That's what the biblical definition of hospitality is to invite the stranger. You might want to invite the pastor and his wife. They don't get invited that much because everybody says, oh, they're so busy. But they may need an invitation. My sister is a pastor's wife, and she was lonely for 2 years as a pastor's wife. And finally, someone invited her over, and it made all the difference in the world.
I think there's something so special about being invited. It makes you feel so seen.
Yeah, so true.
And when you are lonely, it really does minister to a deep need in your soul. It is both a powerful blessing, but a really important way to be able to minister. And it's not about the strawberry shortcake.
No. It's a good thing, because that's too much more. It's too much work for me. I like to say to start small. If you look at the magazines or Pinterest or watch the shows on TV, you get maybe some grandiose ideas of how you would like to be entertained. But there's a huge difference between entertaining and hospitality. Entertainment is about the host, and hospitality is about the guest. And that reminds me of Jesus, because He is all about welcoming us. We are the poor, lowly guests that needed His mercy so much, and that's why He went to the cross. And so when we realize that He has hosted us so beautifully, we can open our doors and say, you know what? This person may just need a little fellowship. It doesn't matter about strawberry shortcake. One time I invited this girlfriend over after church, and it wasn't even for Sunday dinner. And she goes, Sue, I'm a little hungry. Could we have some toast? I go, yeah. So I just made toast and we had coffee. So it's not like we have to have this big thing. We just start small.
When I think about hospitality, the story of Mary and Martha and Jesus coming to their home, He's teaching. Martha is scurrying around, worried and bothered by all the preparations. And Mary is sitting at Jesus's feet, and she kind of bursts into the room and like, Master, don't you care that my sister's not helping me? Now, I'm ad-libbing here. I'm not reading the scriptures straight, but this is how the story goes. And He says, Martha, Martha. Anytime Jesus calls you a double name, maybe you need to think twice. You're worried and bothered about so many things, but Mary's chosen the better thing. And it will not be taken from her. And that's not directly a hospitality story, but the frame around the story is hospitality, of having people over into your home for a purpose. And the purpose here was for them to meet Jesus and to hear from Jesus. And we can have that same purpose in our hospitality, that through the power of the Holy Spirit, when we meet with people, our meeting, they were experiencing Christ in us and
They
through
may
us.
not even come to a Bible study,
Yeah.
or they won't come to church because they've had church hurt, or they have no interest. But they'll come to your house for chocolate chip pancakes and bacon on a Saturday morning. So you don't have to go across the world to be a missionary. You need to start with your own neighborhood. I found it easier to be hospitable when I was in Papua New Guinea and when I lived in Brazil, because those cultures are more hospitable. But when you're in the United States, it's awkward that you don't know your neighbor's name who's lived down the street for 30 years. And for you to say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, would you and your wife like to come over for hamburgers and hot dogs this Saturday? They will be delighted. And even if they say no, you've done the Lord's work.
There's so many good things that can happen when people meet together. So it's less about the table and the food and more about the connection happening around it. The holidays can be such a complicated time. They're filled with opportunities for connection, but they can also highlight loneliness and leave us feeling overwhelmed by expectations. What encouragement would you give to someone who wants to offer hope and welcome this season without getting trapped in perfectionism or burnout?
I had attended a Christmas open house at somebody else's house, and it was called a chocolate open house. Everybody brought chocolate, which made it so easy for the host and then for the guests. The next year, I said, let's do a chocolate open house. We had a lot of return hospitality things we needed to do. So we just invited everybody. I think we invited 100 people and we had 50. Everybody brought chocolate, so it made it easier for me. And there's this psychiatrist, a Jewish gal, who said, can I help you set up a non-chocolate table? So we had a sign that had the line through the word chocolate, and she helped do that. And everybody had a grand time. We did have a chocolate cake that said Jesus' birthday cake. That was the big witness for the night. So I don't know if that offered hope, but it showed off who God was to us. The next year, that started the Neighborhood Women's Saturday Christmas brunch where people brought things. And so that's so simple. And I may only get 10. I think this year I had 8 women. And I thought, Lord, is this worth all the work? But for those 8 women, by the time it was over, I thought, okay, it was worth it.
So hospitality, I think maybe feels a little bit more intuitive for extroverts. It's more top of mind. Their brains are more geared towards possibly reaching out. I know the true definition of introvert and extrovert isn't how much you enjoy people, it's where you get your energy from. Encourage the introvert. Because you're talking about your husband. So maybe hospitality looks a little different or functions a little differently if you're an introvert or you have an introvert in your home. And so just some thoughts on that.
I have lots of thoughts on that because I've been married 37 years and my youngest daughter is an extreme introvert, but she knows how to run a room at 29 because she's raised in this house, but she needs a rest afterwards. But same with my husband. So what my husband is quoted in my first book. He said, too many people dissipates the fellowship. And he's right. When it's a big open house like this, like the funny chocolate one we did, when it's a big open house, that's a different kind of fellowship, where even the introvert will find one friend to talk to and they'll feel seen. But when you're having just one couple over, you can ask about how did you meet? And I have a book called 252 Conversation Starters because I don't want to waste time. We only have a certain couple hours and we got to get to know this person. So at Easter, when I invited the neighbors, I put questions under their plates. And then I said, you don't have to answer that question. You can pass it to the person next to you. But the whole idea is these are people who like to talk. Some of my most talkative friends are introverts. I'm sorry to say they talk a lot, but they want to have their time in the sun and everybody else has to be quiet. So when you have a conversation starter, we say, John, it's your turn. When was the time? Who was your best friend when you were 10 years old? And what did you enjoy doing together? Oh boy, do we hear great stories about their past. And then someone else will say, we lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin too, and I had a paper route like you did. And so it's just a way of connecting. One other thing about being an introvert is that introverts, like you say, want to be seen. So if you just invite the quiet person and then you also connect them with someone else at your table that maybe is a little more talkative, that helps them. Also, if they say, can I bring something? You always say yes. Because an introvert told me this once, Ginger. I like having something in my hand when I walk in the door. It makes me feel more comfortable.
I love that. I
Interesting.
love that. We've been married for 35 years and we have always had people over a lot and been more inviters than not. But I've noticed that in this season of life that we're in right now, that there's been kind of a transition. And it's almost as if I'm becoming more of an introvert and my husband is becoming more extroverted as he is functioning as a missionary and outreaching to all these young Marines in our life. And we do a lot of entertaining. And the energy level is different for me in my 60s than it was when I was in my 40s.
Absolutely.
And so we've just had to learn to navigate that a little bit. And, I've had to say to my husband, I really need some heads up.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
I will shift
Yeah.
in the moment if I can, but I have so much on my plate right now. I can't always shift that fast. And we've just had to work on that. I love it when we have people over, but I do know that I am tireder after being around a big crowd than I used to be. And why that is, I don't know, but it is.
I had my husband bring home patients for dinner without telling me, and that doesn't happen very often. You have to do the boundaries. One thing you asked about how to encourage the introvert, I have found, even as an extreme over the top extrovert, that it helps me personally to partner with a friend that I can trust in being hospitable, especially when I was a new mom. I was very lonely. I had these close friends. I would have them over, and then we would each invite another person that we didn't know as well. When this new people would come, I could trust my other friends to engage in conversation because I had kids all around it. It's hard. I was speaking at a MOPS once, and this gal raised her hand and said, I have 4 kids. Do I wait till they're all in college before I have anybody over? I said, heavens no, honey. This is when you need your other moms to come over. Doesn't matter if the house is a wreck, because their homes are wrecks too. But the idea is that if you have one friend, start with a partner. My mother had her sister-in-law, and every Sunday we had company, either at my house or at my aunt's house. And then whoever was new to church would be invited to either house. But she told me later it was because she loved Aunt Joy, her sister-in-law, and she knew she could trust her to help her be hospitable because she wasn't raised in a hospitable home.
Yes. How do you encourage the person who hasn't been around that? It's not part of how they grew up and things like that. What are some simple ways that you can start to put your toe into hospitality?
One thing I did when the kids were in elementary school, I invited their school teacher over for tea after school. And our little kid would do all the talking because she was so thrilled that her teacher was there. So that was good for our kids to learn how to host. And it was a simple way for me because I could just use banana bread, or Pepperidge Farm cookies are delicious. And a pot of tea is not difficult. The way my mother did it is that she made mistakes, and then she realized she lived through them, and that it really didn't matter. In fact, I've made so many mistakes, and I realized that puts me on everybody's level. We're all level at the foot of the cross, but we're all level in hospitality when we make mistakes in front of other people, and they feel, oh, I can invite Sue over because I just saw what her couch looked like, and just to get over ourselves that way. So yeah, do it with a partner. Buy the food if you need to. Just have coffee.
I love that. This reminds me of a story back in the day when I was first learning to cook and be hospitable. And I invited somebody over, and I was going fancy. I was going to make stuffed shells.
Oh dear.
And I started reading the recipe, and it didn't say whether or not to cook the shells.
Oh dear. Oh, dear.
So,
That's a good one.
a friend of mine had told me about no bake pasta, so I stuffed those hard shells, put the sauce on it, put it in the oven, and served it right up. And because I was serving, I didn't taste it until I started hearing people go crunch, crunch.
Oh no, that's a good one. I'm gonna use that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was probably my biggest faux pas, but it's funny.
That's so funny. Yeah, when I had the pastor and his wife over for dinner the first month we were married, I was a confident cook because I was 35, right?
Mm.
But I messed up the recipe. It was a stuffed meatloaf, but I used too much hamburger because I thought more the better, right? No, it didn't cook. So when I sliced it and everybody had it on their plates, I thought it was pink in the middle because of the ham. No, it was not cooked. And then I'm getting all hot and sweaty, and praise the Lord for microwaves. And I'm picking up each plate and going, oh my goodness, let me heat that up for you. Let me actually cook the dinner for you. And while I was doing that, the sweet pastor's wife, Doris, was saying, oh, I remember when I was a new bride. So, the stories go on. And I just asked the pastor not to use me as a sermon illustration, and he did not.
That was smart of you to ask him not to do
Yeah.
that. Your new book, Never Alone, shares real life stories of lives transformed by simple invitations.
Mhm.
Would you share one that's especially close to your heart, one that captures how God can use hospitality to change us? and change others?
One of my favorites is this homeless fellow I met at work. I worked at the Catholic thrift store for a few years, and he would come in and sing along with the CDs at Christmas time, and he had a lovely baritone. He was very loquacious, and he would go to every thrift store every day. He was a bit of a hoarder, and he lived in his car. And one day, a friend of mine said, Sue, why don't you see if Doug can come to your Christmas Eve soup and bread potluck? And so I said, so Doug, what are you doing for Christmas Eve? And he said, well, I'm hoping my brother will invite me down in L.A. Well, we're about 5 hours from L.A., so it didn't sound very likely. But about a week later, I said, are you going to go to your brother's? He goes, well, I haven't heard from him. And I said, well, would you like to come to our house? We have a Christmas Eve soup and bread potluck, but you don't have to bring anything. Well, he goes, I'll bring crackers and cheese. And so I bought him a little 50-cent tray that we sold. And I said, but we like to go to church at 6 o'clock if you want to come. And I gave him directions. Well, he never made it to church, and he drove around our neighborhood, and he came. And then the next month, I said to him, hey, Doug, you should join our church choir. You have such a lovely voice. And he says, well, I'm not Catholic. And I said, well, I'm not either. I go to this church and we have a choir. Then I said, but there's 3 services, so you'd have to be there like at 7:30 in the morning. He goes, I'm not sure I can do that. That's what he said. But he came to church. I introduced him to our choir director, who warmly welcomed Doug to the choir. And he never stopped coming to church after that. He ended up being able to rent one of the apartments of somebody in our church. He came every Christmas Eve. He bought himself a suit to wear in choir, and he passed away during COVID, and we miss him so much.
That is a wonderful story.
It was a
Thank
blessing
you.
to us.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Sue, I love how you have reminded us today that hospitality isn't about perfect recipes or picture perfect tables. It's about making space for God's love and heart to flow through us. One small invitation can open the door to hope, healing, and deeper relationships, and that story really exemplifies that. Friends, Sue's new book, Never Alone, Stories of Invitation and Connection in an Isolated World, is filled with encouragement, biblical wisdom, and inspiring stories. We will have links in the show notes so that you can grab your copy and keep growing in the gift of welcome. Sue, as we finish up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to mention before we finish off?
Well, I do want to offer to your listeners a free resource. There's a prayer for a hospitality heart, because it really does start with prayer. It may be something that needs to be changed in our own perspective. And God is all about change and changing me. And He's taught me a lot of things through all my failures, and I appreciate that. And there's a free recipe. I think I got it out of a mystery book I was reading. I love those mysteries that have recipes. And then there are some mentoring worksheets. One thing about hospitality is that you get to know younger people, younger in the faith, who need to spend time at your table, not necessarily with biscotti, but that helps. But these mentoring worksheets will help you feel more confident in sharing the Lord. We all have something to share that God has given us. You know, everybody needs to be in some sort of a mentoring relationship. So that resource will be available to your listeners.
Where can folks get that resource, and how's the best way to connect with you?
You can get the resource in the link in your show notes, and then you follow me at welcomeheart.com is my website, and I have tons of free resources as well as things that you can spend money on if you like. And mostly I love to talk about, so if you need a speaker for a workshop or a retreat or a conference, just connect with me. You can fill out the form on my website, welcomeheart.com. Ginger, you've been a wonderful hostess.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, friends, hospitality does not have to be complicated.
Right.
Not at all. And we are so glad that you've been able to join us. Sue, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.